Welcome to Not Your Ordinary Parts, a podcast where we talk about hard things associated with the human experience with the goal of increasing awareness, growth, and healing. You may hear information from professionally licensed therapists, life coaches, healers, doctors, etc. This information is not medical advice or therapy and is not meant to replace actual therapy or instructions given by a doctor or a personal therapist. I'm your host, Jalon Johnson. My guest today is Dr. Ellen Langer. Dr. Langer is a groundbreaking social psychologist, best-selling author, and the first woman to be tenured in psychology at Harvard University. Often referred to as the mother of mindfulness, her pioneering research has redefined what we know about health, aging, the mind-body connection, and the role of perception in shaping reality. For over 4 decades, Dr. Langer has challenged the boundaries of conventional science, showing through meticulous experimentation that what we believe and perceive can profoundly influence our biology. Her iconic Counterclockwise study demonstrated that shifting mindset alone could reverse markers of aging, and her work invites us to question deeply held assumptions and embrace the healing, transformative power of awareness, attention, and possibility. Dr. Langer is the author of numerous influential books, including Mindfulness, Counterclockwise, On Becoming an Artist, and The Mindful Body. Her research has appeared in academic journals and media outlets worldwide, and her work continues to revolutionize our understanding of human potential. In a world often driven by certainty and autopilot, Dr. Langer offers something radically different, a call to wake up, pay attention, and realize that almost everything we believe to be fixed is in fact up for change. So, Dr. Langer, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being my guest.
Yeah, thank you for that lovely introduction. I was being lulled, as I didn't want you to stop, but I'm.
You're quite welcome. And also, I did give a brief introduction, but so that the audience can get to know you a little bit better, would you mind giving us a little bit of background about yourself and how you got to who and where you are today?
Oh gosh, I'm 78 years old, so that would take the whole time we have. And one never really knows. What I often say, because I mark the edge of the optimism continuum. And so people want to know, well, how did that happen? And I think it's just because my parents were wonderfully supportive. And so even as a little kid, let's say Jalon is upset, I say, well, John, why don't you look at it this way? And Jalon would then become less upset. So I have many, many years of doing this and then put it all in a research framework and have been very fortunate. But not without, it's not as if I do these unusual studies and then the world quickly changes. So you mentioned in the introduction, mind-body connection, which gets me crazy. Let me tell you why. So I have been doing this work actually for 5 decades. It's a very long time before you were even born. And if you think of, and most people implicitly buy into mind-body dualism. You don't walk around and you don't even know you're doing it, but you have a very clear sense that what I'm thinking is totally separate from what I'm feeling and my physical health. And so everybody knows about placebos, for example. And a placebo, you take a nothing, a sugar pill, you think it's something, and it changes your biology, right? It cures many diseases. How could that be? How do you get from a fuzzy thing called a thought to something material called the body? So I say, wait a second, this is ridiculous. Mind, body, they're just words. Let's change this and put the mind and body back together. And if we see the mind and body as one thing, then wherever you're putting the mind, you're necessarily putting the body. So it's not connected. You see, because if you say connected, you still have, how are they connected? You still have the problem. How did you get to this fuzzy thought to something material? It's one thing. And we've done so many studies that where the findings, I think, would be very surprising to people to test this. And it seems to be a very helpful way of looking at the organism, the human being. So the one you mentioned, for instance, this was the first test, the counterclockwise study, was the first test of mind-body unity. And what we did was we retrofitted a retreat to appear to be 20 years earlier, and we had elderly men live there for a week as if they were their younger selves. So they spoke about past events in the present tense, for instance. And that very simple thing, in just a week, or less than a week, actually, their vision improved, their hearing improved, their memory, their strength, and they look noticeably younger. And that was the first of these. And we have so many, and I'm happy to tell you about them, but I'm going to give you a chance to ask me.
Thank you so
I
much.
don't always do that, so be grateful for the opportunity to speak on your own show.
I appreciate that. Also, I mean, since you just touched on it, let's dig into the counterclockwise experiment a moment. Because the fact that you said they look noticeably younger, like
Yeah.
that is incredible. And if you would, can you just, maybe expound on what it was a little bit more, please?
Well, it's hard for people to accept. It's easy to understand, but it's hard to accept because it goes so much against the grain, people
Yes.
believing mind, body, they're two separate things. So when your mind is in a younger place, so we had to, in a sense, give them a social placebo, have them be their younger selves. And as their younger selves, then their bodies cooperate. Much of what we believe about aging is just a function of our mindsets. We did very early studies. And people should probably know when you said that I was the mother of mindfulness. Mindfulness, as we study it, is not meditation. Meditation is fine, and this is just different. When you meditate, you take yourself away from the world, sit quietly for 20 minutes twice a day. And meditation isn't mindfulness. Hopefully, it results in post-meditative mindfulness. Mindfulness, as I study it, is the very simple process of noticing. Now, people think they're noticing everything, and we notice almost nothing, which
Mhm.
is a colleague of mine did a wonderful study that is also hard to believe, but it's replicated and it's a very robust finding, where they had people watching a basketball game. In the middle of the basketball game, somebody dressed in a gorilla suit walked on the court. Nobody saw it. So the more firm our expectations are, the less smart we become, the less we see, the less we hear. And so I often start when I talk about the importance of noticing for people to recognize that almost all the time, virtually all of us are mindless. We're not there. And we're not there to know that we're not there. So a simple thing, the one thing that I think everybody thinks they know is how much is 1 plus 1. So Jalon, how much is 1 plus 1?
I don't know now.
Well, that's
Two.
no, that's a
Two.
good answer. But it's not always 2. If you were
Mhm.
to add 1 wad of chewing gum plus 1 wad of chewing gum, 1 plus 1 is 1. If you add 1 pile of laundry plus 1 pile of laundry, 1 plus 1 is 1. If you add 1 cloud plus 1 cloud, 1 plus 1. Somebody sent me one the other day, which I love. If you take 1 pizza and you add 1 pizza, 1 plus 1 is 2. If you
Mhm.
take 1 lasagna and you add 1 lasagna, 1 plus 1 is 1. It's just a bigger lasagna. All right. So in the real world, 1 plus 1 doesn't equal 2 as or more often as it does. Now, what's the point? The point is that once you recognize that, you sit up and you pay attention, right? Somebody comes and asks you, how much is 1 plus 1? You don't mindlessly say 2. Sometimes it can be 1. So when you're mindful, you have choices. When you're mindless, you're no different from a robot. And, as we both said, I've been doing this for so long. We've had many, many measures to put in these different studies. Early on, we make people more mindful, they live longer. When people are more mindful, they're seen as charismatic, they're more effective, the relationships are better, everything is better. 50 years is a long time to be studying this. And, and the good thing is that it's so easy to become mindful. All you need to do is know you don't know. Now,
Mhm.
we all know we don't know. However, we think we should know. So we pretend, we give those who are acting as if they know great power over us and the situation we're in. And we don't enter many of the situations because we don't know. They don't know either, is the point. You see, everything is always changing. Everything looks different from different perspectives. So we can't know. So nobody knows. Now it's okay not to know, right? If I know you don't know, now we can both sit up and see, what is available for us to notice right now. And so when you're mindful, you can take advantage of opportunities to which you'd otherwise be blind, and you avert the dangers not yet arisen. You're there, you're present. And it's very sweet. Lots of people for decades now talk about be in the moment, be in the present, stop and smell the roses, whatever you're
Mhm.
supposed to do. And that's nice, except again, people don't take advantage of that because when you're not in the present, you don't know you're not there. So, two ways to get there. One is top down, theory that leads to different action, which is to accept that uncertainty is ubiquitous. We can't know. And when you really know you can't know, then you naturally tune in. The other is bottom up. So walk out your door that you've walked out every day for however long you've lived where you're living and notice three new things. Nothing holy. There's nothing about three, it could be five. Notice new things. Notice new things about your closest friend, your spouse. Notice new things about your work environment, the people there. Three new ways of doing things. Each time you notice new things about the things you thought you knew, you come to see, hey, I didn't really know that. Like now you see you didn't really know how much 1 + 1 is. Right? So we notice new things and then we become uncertain. And this uncertainty gives us an enormous amount of power over ourselves. And I forgot the question you asked me, but that was a long
I don't
answer.
even think it matters at this point. Thank you so much for that. And oh my goodness, there's so much that so for a lot of people, for most people, there's no safety in uncertainty because there's no power.
Well,
But
well,
from
the safety that I mean that's clever of you. The people want certainty because they think that gives them control, but it
right.
robs them of control because the situation is changing. And it's easy to accept uncertainty when you understand that it's the rule. It's not just you. So you go from making what I call a personal attribution for uncertainty. I don't know, but they know, and they're going to find out I'm an idiot, and that's going to be terrible. To a universal attribution for uncertainty. I don't know. You don't know. Nobody knows.
Mhm.
And now let's find out. So if you were to come to visit me right now, I'm at my house in Provincetown. You've never been here before. You don't have to practice anything. You walk in, it's all new. You'd want to notice, did she do those paintings? What books is she reading? What's that strange thing over there? Oh, she eats those. Gee, I like those too. For whatever snack. It would be a natural thing. And the interesting thing for people to understand is that when you're actively noticing the neurons are firing, and all of these many years of research has shown that it's literally and figuratively in life. Now, if you
Mhm.
ask yourself, can robots have fun? No, right? And when you're being mindless, you're no different from a robot. So
Mhm.
every time you're enjoying yourself, you're actually being mindful. But there are too many things in our culture that lead us to be mindless. And that's what my goal is to try to change that and help people.
It seems like the only certainty is uncertainty.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that is such a radical concept. I mean, who would accept that without having an explanation that would basically change their entire reality? And for someone to be going through life mindless, it seems like
Well, most people are most of the time.
yeah,
Well, so
it
let me
would
tell you, I was at a horse event many years ago. And remember, I am a straight A student, Harvard, Yale, all the way. Right. Okay. Genius Award. I mean, I know everything. I'm at this horse event, and this man asked me, "Oh, I watch his horse for him because he's going to get his horse a hot dog." Hot dogs? What is he talking about? Horses don't eat meat. I say, "Sure, I'll watch the horse." He came back with the hot dog, and the horse ate it. And that's when I realized everything I thought I knew could be wrong. But you see,
mm,
I'm different from most people. Rather than get scared about that, I thought it was very exciting because that meant all the things that people say can't be true may actually be true. And I think the way for people to understand this, much of our information, many of our facts come from science. But science doesn't give us absolute facts. Science only gives us probabilities. So if you did an experiment with horses, first you'd have to say what kind of horses, how hungry are they, how big are they, how much meat is mixed with how much, a lot of things. And then afterwards you'd find most of those horses didn't eat meat. It's such a mouthful that it's just easier to say horses don't eat meat, but they do on some occasion. Okay. And so, and think about it in the health context when you're told, this is good for you or that's bad for you. Well, it's not good for everybody. It's not bad for everybody. And so you have to pay more attention to yourself, uh, to your body as you're consuming that thing, or if you're told to take, that you need an operation. And, sadly, I mean, we would like to think that that surgery is going to definitely be effective, but there's no research that will show that to be the case. It would only be that for most people like you with this problem that's like yours, most people are helped. Very different. So when we recognize everything is maybe, possibly, it would seem, it could be, life, I think, in many ways becomes much more exciting.
I think it would take a certain type of person to be excited by the fact that almost everything we believe to be certain is up for change, because that could be scary.
Sure, but it's on. Well, okay, yes, there are two reasons why it's scary. One is that you think it's not true for other people, so
Mhm.
again, you're feeling stupid. But the other is because when we're scared of negative outcomes, and it turns out that outcomes themselves, consequences, are neither positive nor negative. Our minds make them positive or negative. And so the more mindful you are, the more alternative ways of seeing an event. I was explaining this the other day on a podcast. It was very funny. So I'm saying positive, negative, it's in our heads. I said, so let's say my internet goes out. Well, so what? I'll go and I'll have breakfast. For them, I said I would go and have lunch. I do these all day long. All right. But the thing that was so funny is that then my internet went out. And I got to see that I was true to what I'm saying. And I did. I went and I ate lunch. That most things are really, it's only our minds that make them, oh my God. In fact, I have a one-liner for people. Many of my friends have put this on their refrigerator, which is, next time you're stressed, ask yourself, is it a tragedy or an inconvenience? And, I missed the appointment. I hit the car. I burnt the meal. So what? And so you realize most things are not big deals. And then you breathe a sigh of relief and you go on. Another thing people might do, because you see, to be stressed, what you have to do is believe something is going to happen. And when it happens, it's going to be awful. And if you review the last 10 times you were stressed, probably none of those things ever happened. So what you're doing is wasting time. Now, lots of people think, well, if I worry about it and it happens, I'll be better off. No, if you worry about it, you're wearing yourself down in so many ways, and feeling incompetent. So when it happens, you're less able rather than better able to deal with
Mm, wow. I feel like just these few minutes we've been talking so far has shifted like my entire reality, because
it.
almost everything that I thought to be certain or true is only because my brain tells me that it is. And
Well, and because what happens is when you think, so let's say you think your friend is a miserable bastard. Okay. Why he's your friend, I don't know. But so then what you do is you're looking for everything he does wrong and not paying any attention to the things that would contradict that. So you keep confirming your beliefs. And so the way to get out of that is to ask yourself the opposite question. How is he wonderful? Which of course you must believe if he is your friend.
right,
I've never
right.
used this example before. It's very funny. And cursing on a podcast. Oh my goodness. But okay.
We're all good. um, Clearly, you being called the mother of mindfulness is very, very spot on. What's it like for you to be called the mother of mindfulness? What does it actually mean? And
Well, being
not
mindful, as I said, is just
mm.
active noticing. And since I've been studying it for so long that I'm considered the mother, it's a nice child to have. What is the question you're asking me?
What I guess to us to be able to hold that you maybe, for lack of a better word, created mindfulness. What's that like for you? What does that feel like?
Well, it's interesting that I was giving a talk. I guess it was about maybe even 5 years ago, a while ago, in Chicago, and in this big venue. And then I walked outside and I walked around the block, and there was a little restaurant called the Mindful Burger. so,
Oh, wow.
it amuses me part of the time.
Mm.
As long as people, that I'm on this quest, it's a I have been a happy camper. As I said, I mark the edge of the optimism continuum. I have, you can't reach the age that I am and not have experienced things. I mean, my mother died when she was, 57. I was divorced when I was very young. I had a major fire that destroyed 80% of what I've been through the ringer, just like everybody else. But I never dwelled on it. And that it seems to me that it's not that hard for people to be happy the way I am. And so I'm on a quest. I did something the other day. I just wrote this children's book, and somebody asked me, "Oh, why would you write a children's book?" And I said, "Because almost everybody I know is depressed. It's very
Mhm.
sad. I mean, it's very good for the drug companies, but and I don't think you can raise happy kids if you yourself aren't happy. Or maybe you can, but it's much more difficult than them just watching you and mimicking that. And then I thought, well, I don't think it's that hard. I mean, it's not complicated. It's simple but hard because we've been stuck in being miserable for so long. But that many people think that the way to be happy is to be wealthy, powerful, have a lot of status. And so they seek these things and get into lots of troubles, personal troubles, in doing so. Most people don't achieve the ends that they're seeking. When if you stopped and you looked, you'd see that there are many people at Harvard that are unhappy, so there's your status. There are many billionaires that are taking the same antidepressants that you are. And the powerful, they need that power often because they're so unhappy. Why do they want this power, status, and money? Because they want the respect from other people. Why do they care about what other people think? Because that determines what we think about ourselves. So if we liked ourselves, we wouldn't need any of that. And there's a much easier way to get to that place. And it's not zero sum. It's not if I'm happy, that means you have to be unhappy. All of us can experience the same positive state of being. And essentially, and in the book, the mindful body that we're supposed to be talking about, I go through lots of this. But I must tell you, so many years of research and so many really big findings beyond just the counterclockwise that we've talked about, or making people more mindful and they live longer. Despite all of those very exciting findings, the one thing that has made the biggest impact on me in my life was the simple realization that behavior makes sense from the actor's perspective, or else the actor wouldn't do it. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, "Today I'm going to be obnoxious, aggressive, impulsive." So when people are acting this way, what are they intending? And so I realized that, so let's take me, for instance. I'm wonderfully good, terribly gullible. I mark the edge of that continuum. I've been taken by two psychopaths, not just one. Cost me a lot of money. Okay. So I might go to you and Jean, help me. Look at how gullible I am. And we both agree have to change this. And I try to change, and I might change it very briefly, but over time, I'm going to always fail. And the reason for that is going forward, my intention is not to be gullible. My intention is to be trusting. And I value being trusting. And as long as I'm trusting, there are times I'm going to be gullible. If you value being flexible, you're going to seem inconsistent. So your friends say, I can't bear being with you. You're always changing your mind. Oh, I'm going to change that, you say. I'm going to be nice and consistent. But you're not going to be consistent as long as you value being flexible. So we did this study forever ago. We gave people about, I remember it was 200 or 300 of these behavior descriptions. And we said, check off those things about yourself that you keep trying to change and you fail. So me being gullible, being impulsive, I won't share the rest. And then you turn the sheet over, and in a random order, mixed up order, are the positive versions of each of these. Now people are asked, check those things that you really value about yourself. And what I value about myself is my spontaneity and my being trusting. And as long as I value my spontaneity, I'm going to at times appear impulsive. As long as I value being trusting, at times I'm going to be taken. But I wouldn't have it any other way. So now what happens is when I do something, whatever it is, I know there was a good reason for it, or else I wouldn't have done it, no matter how else that action might be characterized by others. And then you extend this to other people. So, Jilan, just to make it clear, if you and I, go out in this world and we're very close friends, and something happens, I don't want you to ever forgive me, because my intention was never to cause whatever pain I might have caused. I want you to understand why I did what I did. And that obviates the necessity for forgiveness.
Oh my goodness. Reframing literally like changes everything.
Yes, yeah. And once your relationships change, once I know I can count on you because you're, a good guy and I enjoy your company, that then I'm easier when I'm with you. So I'm not uptight, I'm not stressed, so I'm able to experience the world, and that means I'm going forward more mindfully.
Mm.
And the more
Wow.
mindful I am, the more I can understand your behavior in a positive framework, and our relationship improves.
Mm. This is amazing. I mean, the way you have laid this out, just from mindfulness to actually restructuring reality, is just incredible. So incredible.
Thank you.
Before all of the accolades, before the books, before Harvard,
Was there a
who
before?
who was young Ellen? Can you take us back to what it
Uh,
was like for you growing up?
yeah, I was very, very fortunate. My parents were wonderfully, wonderfully supportive. In fact, I think my mother would have had me laminated if she could have figured that out. I mean, and so that gave me, a base that allowed me to notice and be out in the world in ways that others might be afraid. If you're punished every time you speak, you're going to be less likely to speak. If you're told, yay, that's wonderful, you're going to go out there in the world quite differently. And so
Mhm.
I think that was the basis for all of it. And my parents weren't wealthy; quite the contrary. They weren't um, big intellectuals. In fact, it occurred to me I must have been smart in a certain street smart way, even when I was very young. Because so in my house, they were just wonderful people, ordinary, wonderful, wonderfully ordinary, and ordinarily wonderful. And I was in, I think it was elementary school, and we were asked to write down the magazines we had in the house. And I didn't remember that we had any magazines in the house, or certainly none that, I thought they wanted me to have in the house. And, which was interesting that I would be aware of that. I might have written down magazines that my friends had in their house, but it didn't matter. We have. I think you want to bring up successful kids. You just make them feel good about themselves. That's oversimplified, but basically, I think the key to my success, to the degree to which I'm successful, I'm successful. Why be silly about it?
Thank you for being honest.
Uh,
What
the
was school
other
like for you?
day, the other day, my 10-year-old grandchild said to me, "Grandma Al, are you famous?" And I laughed. And I thought, well, um, if you ask people in China, you're going to get more yeses than in Sweden. And I thought, well, he doesn't have to know about that. I said, if you ask somebody and they don't know who I am, they're probably going to say no. If you ask somebody and they've heard my name before, they'll may say yes. If you ask the family, they'll all say yes. So, but those are the kinds of answers you want to give children, not these absolutes.
Sure.
And as soon as you have the absolutes, you stop thinking. And that's what we teach in our schools. Absolutes, 1 and 1 is 2. Horses don't eat meat. Here are the causes of the Civil War, and so on, without saying from whose perspective, for example. It's the way we teach sports. It's the way we teach everything. You're
Everything.
told the way to practice, which in fact actually leads to imperfect, not better performance, is to learn the basics so well that you don't have to think about them anymore. Well, that's crazy because what you're doing is saying, learn the basics mindlessly. You don't want to learn anything mindlessly
Mm.
because who you are at the age, the person you are when you're learning it is now going to control who you are 10 years later when your body is different, and I think that one of the things that people say they enjoy a lot in the book is I make clear that everything that is was once a decision, which
Mm.
means for it to be a decision means there was uncertainty, which means things could be otherwise. And so hidden in there, and I think I pulled it out in different places, is everything is mutable. If it doesn't fit, change it. And people don't do that. I mean, I remember, when we used to go to the movies rather than have these giant TV sets, that people would be sitting there for 2 hours and they'd walk out about the movie. To me, either walk out when you don't like it or find a way to like it. But people accept all sorts of inferior ways of being. We have a notion, for instance, that work must be stressful. That's very sad to me. And there's so many people who spend 40 hours a week or more unhappy at work. Uh, it's so then I make a statement, and it's again like the mind body connection distorted, where I say you want to find work life integration. Somehow that got translated into work life balance. But work life balance is mindless. That suggests work has to be bad. So you have to balance it with something good rather than learn how to do it so that you enjoy it or it's interesting, or at least it's not terrible for you. And for most of the people who are, who are listening to this, for some people, they really, one might argue they don't have a choice. They have to feed the family. And if they lose that job, and they're not going to get another. But that's not true for most of us. Um, and so this mindlessness just is ruling our lives, leading us to be no different from robots. We're essentially sealed in unlived lives. And so my goal, talking to you, Jelani, is to break that seal.
Sealed and unlived lives. It almost seems like we're programmed to be mindless.
Well, no, we're not programmed. We program ourselves. We let the
Correct.
world program us. And what I'm saying is, we need that to change because all this programming has led to all of this depression that I mentioned.
Sure.
So it's not working. If something doesn't work, change it.
Right. Well, what I meant by that was like through the schooling and through our education and things of that nature, like we aren't led down the path of
Right. But it
being
would be
mindful.
very easy. So we have a mindful school going up in September where, the major difference is whether you're taught facts, as absolutes or conditional.
Mm,
1 and 1 could be 2.
yeah.
1 and 1 is often 2. It's not 1 and 1 is 2, period, end of thought. And then you go into the world in a very different way.
And if everything that's absolute now was at one point a decision,
Okay,
it
so
wasn't
yes,
absolute then.
no, it wasn't. It didn't exist. So let me give you an example. Are you an athlete? I see.
Yes.
Oh, well, yeah, of course you're an athlete. Good. So, I'm a tennis player.
Mm,
Now, the game of tennis, you have 2 serves. I'm always playing doubles. And I hit the first serve, I kill it. It doesn't go there. And I have a wuss, a little baby follow-up serve that always goes in, doesn't make any points, but at least nobody else at me. All right. If I ruled the world, you see, because people just accept this is the game rather than the rules of how to play tennis or anything else weren't handed down in the heavens. Somebody decided it was 2 serves. If we had 3 serves, Joanne, I'd be so much better. I'd throw the ball up, I'd kill it. It wouldn't go in, I'll have another chance. I'd throw it up, I'd kill it, and I'd get better and better. Now,
mm,
I'm not suggesting we shouldn't have rules. What I'm suggesting is that I realize that my game would be better if only. Right. So it's not that I am good, bad, or indifferent, or whatever, anything in between at this game. Let me give you a better example. So oftentimes when I lecture in person, I'll look in the audience and I'll say, is there anybody about 6'5", very tall? There's always a guy. I attract very tall guys at these talks for some reason. Like, can you come up to the stage? You come up to the stage. Now he's standing next to me. I'm 5'3". He's 6'5". We look silly, right? I put my hand next to his. His hand is 3 inches long, bigger than mine. And I simply raise the question, should we do anything physical the same way? And I would argue no. So now the point here is if he wrote the rule, I shouldn't mindlessly follow that rule. Here's how you hold the racket. Well, here's how you hold the racket if your hand is very large.
mm,
It's not how you should hold the racket if your hand is very small. Now,
mm,
the professional athletes come to this knowledge on their own. They always, I remember, oh God, so many years ago, I went to a tennis camp and I was told, here's how you, whatever, I don't remember what it was. And so, oh yes, it was backhand. I have a strange backhand. I throw the racket into my left hand for a left hand forehand. Okay. Or sometimes a two-handed backhand. And so they're telling me, here's how you do it, whatever the strokes were. And then I was watching the US Open. I was like, none of those professionals play the game the right way. Right? Because in order to achieve greatness, you have to do it your own way. But we keep teaching people to do it in a specific way that works for you, the more similar you are to the person who created the game, the rule, the way of doing whatever it is you're doing. People stop thinking. They take instruction without realizing that those instructions, I think, should be maybes. Even laws, some of them, you're driving and you're supposed to stay on the right side of the uh, line, and there's nobody else on the road, and there's this big patch of ice in front of you. I mean, I think it would be moronic not to cross the line to avoid the ice and the
sure.
accident. But if a policeman saw me do that, he very well might give me a ticket or she. Yeah, and that's fine. I'm willing to take the ticket. But the point is that um, we rely too heavily on other people's views of how to do things. And in doing so, we give up the joy of discovering who we actually are. Which reminds me
Mm,
of something else, that I started to paint when I was about 50. And I had a friend who, she drank too much, but she was an art collector. So she knew about art. So she came over to the house one day early on in my painting, and she saw one of my paintings. Just, Ellen, there's something there. Now, the alcohol started to speak, and she said, now don't go thinking you're Rembrandt, which I would never have done anyway. And then I said to myself, and Rembrandt isn't me. And what I meant by that is I could try to copy Rembrandt and be the 5,464th, Rembrandt-like painter. Or I can be an original Ellen Langer. And if I'm an original Ellen Langer, nobody can do me better. It doesn't mean anybody has to like it. But the joy of creating is a very different experience under those circumstances.
I love that, because if you're an original Ellen, no one can do you better
Right.
because you're only you.
And wasn't
I
it Victor Hugo? I think it was Oscar Wilde who said, "You might as well be you. Everybody else is taken."
Oh my goodness, I love that. I've never heard that, but I love that. All right, I got a question for you. Going back to tennis, and if there were three serves, right? Because of course, the first serve we try and hit powerful and get an ace, and if the ball is out, we say, okay, on the second serve, I'm just going to make sure
Play it
the
safe.
ball is in. Right, you're gonna play it safe. What if there are only two serves, but we said, okay, there are three, so that our second serve could be just as good as the first serve? How much better would our second serve then be? And how can we apply that in life?
Well, there's so many ways. The first is always remember that we can never. There's no science that can ever prove we can't do anything, can't do something. And so we should stop evaluating ourselves, because also I'm going to forget where I am. So you hold this place right here while I tell you this other. People
Okay.
really think they want perfection. And, since we're talking sports, imagine, so you're a golfer, and every time you swing that club, you get a hole in one. Well, but there's no game then.
Mhm.
Right? If you want to win, play tic-tac-toe against a 5-year-old. You're always going to win. So intuitively, we know that that's not what we want. We want we want the challenge. Otherwise, it's not at all rewarding. So now I did lose my place, but it was over there. Do you remember what it was? No. Let's go someplace new. So you had asked me how people can take advantage of this in many ways. In all that you're doing, remember that the way you were taught to do it is just one of many ways. That's all. And that varying how you do whatever you do is almost always going to get to better performance. So we have the notion, as I said before, practice, keep doing it the same way over and over again so you don't have to think about it. It's crazy, because you don't want to do it mindlessly. And that's what it would lead to. The alternative is you should practice, but the practice should be noticing subtle ways in which everything is different. As your body is different, everything is different. If you're driving, hitting a golf ball, that the first time you hit it, your body is very different from now. You've got this uh, pail of balls. You only have one left, but you've now been hitting and hitting. So by necessity, you need to call upon more of what you have, not do it the exact same way.
Mm.
You notice the subtle differences, the game stays fresh, your performance improves. It's just that simple. And the same thing, in life, that when you're on automatic pilot, which too many of us live our lives that way, again, you can't take advantage of opportunities. So how do you get off automatic pilot? Recognize you don't know, nobody knows, so it's okay, and then you tune in, and everything more or less is fun. I mean, I make everything a game, sometimes quite intentionally. It's just, why not? And a story I told the other day, let me tell you. So it was a graduation at Harvard, and I and several of my colleagues are on stage, not for any important reason, but then realized we couldn't get off the stage because there we are, all the audience, and they're giving out degrees to a lot of students at Harvard. So now we have to sit on that stage as they go through every single person has to be mentioned who just got their PhD in so many. And so they're all not happy. And then I say, okay, because the next one was East Asian Studies. I said, 5 PhDs. And then the person next to me, a colleague, said 2 PhDs. And so we did this, and the time passed very quickly, and it was fun. But when we have again that notion of work-life separation, we don't bring to the work situation all of the things that we do in the rest of our lives that make it fun.
Sure. Speaking of Harvard, you were the first woman to be tenured in psychology at Harvard. What was that like for you? Did you ever feel like
It
an
was
outsider? Did you get any
no,
pushback?
no. It was very funny because after I sat at the first meeting, so in Harvard at that time, we didn't have junior and senior faculty. We had permanent members. And the implication was everybody else was going to leave at some point. And so I'm at this meeting. After the meeting, I asked one of my colleagues, so was my presence different? Because all of a sudden there's a woman there. And he said, no. And, no matter what he said, it would have been insulting, right? He said, yes, it was different. I'm sure it wouldn't all hit him. Anyway, so, I think I don't look at people based on gender, height, any of these. I know, you have an adorable smile. That's something that I would notice. I respond to people who smile differently from not. And so the fact that they were all men didn't really make much of a difference.
You seem to be able to hold your own quite well, so I don't think it would have made a difference anyway.
Well, but remember, I'm 78 now, and I was, 30 then.
Mhm.
A lot of years.
A lot of years.
But I'm the same person.
So I want to talk about your book, Mindful
Yes.
Body, because just based off this conversation, I think anyone would be interested in reading it, and it is an incredible book. What is it you want people to know about it?
Well, I think that if you want to figure out how to be happy and live a long, healthy life, I think the book would be useful. The degree of control we have over our health goes so far beyond what most people assume. Let's go back to the mind body unity studies. Let me just tell you 2 others, and there's so many in there for people to get an idea of, wow, I can control this or that health issue. So the next study in the series, Ali Crum and I did, where we went to chambermaids, and the first thing we asked them is, how much exercise do you get? And interestingly, they say they don't get any exercise. And that's because they thought exercise was what you did after work, and they work is so hard for them. After work, they're just going to rest. Okay, so now we divide them into 2 groups, and all we're going to do is teach one of the groups that their work is exercise. They're taught that making a bed is like working at this machine at the gym, and so on. So now we have two groups, very simple. One group that realizes their work is exercise, one group that doesn't see their work as exercise. We take many, many measures before we start and at the end. And, they're not working any different. One group isn't working harder than the other. They're not eating any differently. Nevertheless, the group that changed their minds and now sees their work as exercise lost weight. There was a change in body mass index, waist to hip ratio, and their blood pressure came down just by changing their minds. Let me tell you one other, the most recent, done with my graduate student, Peter Ungle. So we inflict a wound, minor. Has to be minor because I'm not a sadist. And even if I were, hopefully somebody wouldn't let me do the study. So it's a minor wound. So individually, the person who was just given a wound to is in front of a clock. Unbeknownst to them, the clock is rigged. So for a third of the people, time is going twice as fast as real time. For a third of the people, the clock is going half as fast as real time. And for a third of the people, it's real time. Well, one might assume that wound is going to heal when that wound heals. What's the difference what that clock says, what you believe? And it turns out that clock time, perceived time, determined how fast the wound healed. We have, and there's so many in there that I wish I had the time to talk about all of them. I don't, but if people find it interesting, they can read. And then there's a lot in the book about language, in not complicated language, but the everyday language that leads us astray. So, for example, well, let's take forgiveness, because we talked about that before. Because I said, if you and I go out into this world becoming great friends, I don't want you to ever forgive me. Okay, so I was asked to give a sermon at one of the Harvard churches many years ago. And I'm Jewish and I'm not religious, but I say yes all the time, so I agreed to do it. So now I'm going to give a sermon. What am I going to talk about? I know absolutely nothing about religion. Maybe I'll talk about forgiveness. It's not religion, but I could get away with it. Okay, so I start to think more deeply about forgiveness, and I come away with something that made the people there listening to me gasp, because it was almost sacrilegious. Okay. If you ask 10 people, is forgiveness good or bad? What are they going to tell you?
Good.
It's good, yeah. If you ask 10 people, is blame good or bad? What are they going to tell you? It's bad, right? Well, you can't forgive unless you first blame. That's interesting. Our forgivers are our blamers. Now, do you blame people for good things or bad things? Because things in and of themselves, as we already said, are neither good nor bad. Well, you blame people for bad things. So what does this mean? People who see the world negatively, then blame, and then forgive. Didn't seem to me divine. And that surely, if you blame, it's better to forgive. But there's a better than better way, which is to understand from that person's perspective why they did what they did, which we talked about. That I'm not intending to be gullible, impulsive. You're not intending to be inconsistent, and so on. So I have a lot of that in the book where I talk about, better than better. I have lots of colleagues doing wonderful work where they say, this is bad. They get you to the next place. I say, oh, there's a whole other place to be. So some of our everyday language, let's say hope. Isn't hope good? I don't think so. It's certainly better than being hopeless. But when I go down to the kitchen in the morning to get a cup of coffee, I don't hope there'll be coffee there, right? So hope has built into it an expectation for failure, right? So it seems positive. It's more positive than being hopeless, but it's not really as positive as it could be. Try. You tell a little kid, try to do it. Well, you don't try to eat an ice cream cone. You
You do
just
or you
eat
don't.
eat the ice cream cone. So trying has built into it an expectation for failure. So there are all these ways that we're unintentionally hurting ourselves and the people around us. We just don't expect as much from ourselves as we should. And part of that is we're so afraid to fail. And part of that is not realizing that if you had complete success, you'd get that hole in one in every shot and there'd be no game there. The other one I'm fond of using, you're a little kid and you get in that elevator and you can't reach the button and the adult with you picks you up and you press the button and you're thrilled. Next time you go in the elevator, you're getting a little closer, but it's great fun. Now you're tall enough. You get in the elevator, you press the button. All right. And when was the last time, Jalom, that you were excited about hitting that elevator button? So we need to
Right.
understand that the things we run from, provide much of our happiness, excitement, and feeling of mastery.
Wow. I hope every person alive reads this book.
That would be beautiful.
Because if we can just see things differently, like we can change our lives, we can change the world.
Right.
Wow. Thank you for the work that you've done to give this gift to everyone. And like I said, I hope that as many people as possible will read it. Let me ask you this. If there was one thing in particular that you would want to be known for or that would define your legacy, what would you want that to be?
Mm. I'm not sure. Maybe that I help the world become more mindful.
Mm. That's enough.
Yeah.
All right, last question for you. If you could use your platform to educate anyone who may be struggling with their mental or emotional health or mindfulness and might be uncertain of how or where to start, what would you say?
Um, make the decision to no longer be a robot. And that means recognizing, accepting the power of uncertainty and get to
Mhm.
exploit the power of uncertainty.
Indeed. Well, Dr. Langer, thank you so much for this opportunity. I have enjoyed this conversation so much. I've learned so much from it. Just the opportunity to sit with you and share space with you and listen to you basically decode reality is incredible, and I'm so grateful to have had this opportunity.
It was a pleasure for me as well.
If people want to find you online or on social media, where can they find you?
Well, I have a website, ellenlanger.me, but if you type in ellenlanger.com, it takes you there. But just put in my name and a lot comes up. On my website, you have my books um, and my art, some of my art, and so on. That's probably the best way. Isn't that
Okay,
the way
great.
everybody already comes to know anybody anyhow? You know?
It is for sure.
They can
All right, well,
find my
Dr. Langer.
ask them.
Okay, well, thank you again for this. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for what you do, and thank you for how you do it.
Thank you.